Greetings, Mark Rang here, publisher of The Sun. My guest today is Heath Howard, a congressional candidate. Heath, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me this morning. I really appreciate it.
Sure. And so you're a Democratic candidate for Congress. The first district is wide open, as we know. Chris Pappas is leaving to be a Senate. So you're from, one is you're a young guy, and you're a two-term state rep, right?
Yes, correct.
How old are you?
I'm 25. You know, I'm the youngest one in this race for U.S. Congress, and you know, I'm funny enough younger than some of my opponent's kids.
I can see that. And you're from, I did a little test to prove my own knowledge of New Hampshire, and I said, well, and you're from Stratford.
Yes.
So I asked the staff, our editorial staff, do they know where Stratford is? And they said no.
Yep.
So, and I looked it up, so I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not too far. I mean,
I
we have a whole county that our town is named after. You know, the Stratford County, that name came first. We changed our name of our town after we split away from Barrington in 1830.
Okay, so, and you are a little bit west of Rochester, basically.
Yes.
It's a small town.
Oh, I went to school in Rochester. I ended up going to Spalding High School. I graduated from there in 2018. I went on to the University of New Hampshire. You know, I mean, I met my amazing partner there, which, you know, Alexis, she's great. I love her. And, you know, it's one of those things where I'm completely homegrown. I'm a 7th generation Granite Stater. I've lived here my whole life. And it's something where I'm very proud of the opportunity and the honor that my community has given me. And I hope that I can serve the 1st Congressional District in the same way that I've served my hometown.
So what have you been doing in a nutshell? What have you been doing in the State House?
Yeah, so I mean, I was the 2nd most active Democratic legislator in the House last year. I was the 2nd most effective Democratic legislator in the House. I had 28 of my bills pass our chamber. I had 7 signed by the governor last year alone. And
when you say 7, you mean these are you co-sponsored or?
Sponsored or co-sponsored.
Okay.
So I had, you know, bills like, you know, in terms of expanding the way that we are able to establish communications districts. That was one that I co-sponsored, and that's one that was, you know, really based off of the fact that we don't really have many broadband options here in New Hampshire, and how we need to be pushing for, you know, making sure that we have access to fiber and internet services that will actually help move our economy forward.
Okay, so if a couple of them were signed by the governor, obviously they're bipartisan.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, how's it like, are there any of the bills that you would like to have seen passed that were not passed in the House?
Yeah,
I mean, like significant ones.
Yes.
I know there are a lot because
yeah.
the House is dominated by the Republicans.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a few. I mean, I've sponsored things like cannabis legalization here in New Hampshire, and that is something where I think, you know, especially looking at the revenue that we're seeing from the state and how that is, you know, far lower than what we should be kind of expecting. This is a way that we can help increase those revenues without increasing taxes on the taxpayers, which I think is really important how we are able to pursue. You know, I also think that, you know, we had a bill last year to ban private equity firms from engaging in the single-family housing market. I think that that's huge, especially when you're looking, you know, up here in Conway. I mean, I had a number of conversations today about people who are talking about the housing market and how Airbnbs are kind of dominating everything. But the thing is that those Airbnbs, they're owned oftentimes, and a lot of times, more and more so now, by private equity firms and large corporations. And they're making it so that it's inaccessible for people my age to get involved in the housing market. And that's really problematic when we look at how our state is aging.
But how many, how dominant, how much of a factor is that in New Hampshire? Because I've heard that before on a national level, and people say it's really not that big a deal because it's only like 5% of the houses.
Yeah.
In New Hampshire, is it?
Well, it's becoming more of a problem, especially as we're seen in the Northeast as a whole as a climate haven. I mean, we're seeing, you know, droughts in California, flooding in Florida, and, you know, people are looking as to where they can go to kind of avoid a number of these catastrophes. And New England is one of those places that's being highlighted. So that's where people are kind of saying, hey, we need to put our firm's focus here in New England, and that's why they're buying up properties. And we're seeing it, you know, especially in a little bit more so now than last year per se. And this is becoming more and more of an issue. And in New Hampshire, it's especially an issue because we were ranked 46th in the country for business development by MSNBC. It's a situation where when we look at the reasons why, it comes down to the fact that we don't have the labor force necessary. Because in terms of what we're looking at with the housing market and the education situation that we have here in the state, where we have the highest in-state tuition anywhere in the country for our public universities, young people are leaving. And that is very problematic for a state that is now the oldest state in the country, more so than Maine, and we're not seeing any way of slowing that down. We need to think about how we can retain our young people, because our oldest generation and our youngest generation are inexplicably linked. If we don't have young people moving into the state, businesses aren't going to stay here. They're not going to come here. I mean, we already saw the Budweiser distillery in Merrimack close down, for example. And, we're a state that hasn't legalized cannabis, going back to that discussion. And the alcohol industry is trying to promote business in states that haven't legalized, because they're trying to move the states towards going away from alcohol and towards cannabis. And so that's something that we do need to kind of think about, is why aren't businesses coming here? Why aren't they staying here? And it comes down to the fact that people are not staying here and young people are leaving. And that's where we have to kind of think about how this is also going to affect our tax structure, because we're a monotax state. Everything that we pretty much pay into the state system is through property taxes.
But I'm going to interrupt here for a couple things. One is, you talk about the age thing, and most of the people in the State House are like my age, because they got nothing else to do and they're retired. God bless them. It's a great hobby. Can I ask how you support yourself then, if you're 25 years old?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I still live at home with my parents, like many other 25-year-olds that I know. I mean, it's a situation where I'm very fortunate in that regard, and I'm able to provide the perspective that I think is very necessary. But there are a lot of people moving in with their parents after college because the price of housing is so high. And this is partially why young people are leaving the state, because they're looking for housing, they're looking for opportunity elsewhere, and it's not here in New Hampshire. And that's where we have to figure out how we can reverse that, because going back to what I was saying with property taxes, our oldest population who is still living here, they're paying those property taxes on fixed income, meaning it's going to hurt more and more every year as we lose young people and
I know
businesses.
we're talking about, and we're going to talk about more of the national issues as being a congressperson, but on the state level, everybody complains about the property taxes.
Yes.
How do you fix that? I mean, I know that there's the interest and dividends tax that went away, which I assume you would say, let's bring it back.
Yeah, I think
but
that...
not broad-based tax?
Well, I think that when we're talking about the tax structure, we have things like cannabis legalization that we can pursue. We have the interest and dividends tax that we can bring back. I think that we need to be talking about how we can make a more equitable tax structure, and that starts with bringing back some of these additional models and making sure that we can also pursue options that don't necessarily impact the tax base.
I mean, the fundamental reason with any broad-based tax, and I don't think you're not are you advocating any sales or income tax?
Not at the moment, no.
Not at the moment. So that means, what would be, that means you might tomorrow, or?
Well, I think, well, the thing is that in terms of an income tax, I think that, we need to be a lot more, receptive to having conversations around that issue in particular, because it is something where when we're talking about how we can proceed forward, I mean, I don't think that putting a sales tax on groceries or something is really an acceptable way forward. And I know that there are some, exemptions that people can talk about when we're talking about those sales taxes. But in terms of what we should be pursuing, I think that we need to have a real dialogue around, income and taxing income, because that's a far more equitable way. Because one of the things that we're seeing with the property taxes too, and the tax caps that are being placed on multiple different communities in the state, is that those rates are stagnant. But what changes is the valuation of people's homes. And so we're seeing a huge change in the valuation of homes, and that really changes how much you end up paying. And that makes things a lot less clear and a lot less transparent as to how much people should be paying in taxes and how much they actually are. And that's something that I think that we can easily fix if we actually bring this into the discussion.
But you know that, I mean, the pushback is nobody likes to pay any taxes, but property taxes, it's all about local control. Because if you have to give more to the state, the money just goes away, it goes out. And any state, and most states, we're not the least taxed state in the union if you figure in the property taxes. But places like Maine and Massachusetts, the taxes are higher. They have an income tax and they have a property tax. So you have to get past the whole thing of how taxes aren't going to keep going up anyway. That's the fundamental issue, right?
Exactly. Right. And that's where I think that we need to be looking at options like cannabis legalization, like making sure that we can kind of consider what other secondary home taxes could be placed on a building per se. And there are a number of exemptions that can be discussed.
There was a bill that was just defeated or didn't get out of the House committee or whatever about taxing on luxury homes over a certain
Yes.
amount, and that
Yeah.
just went away. Would you
Yeah.
support something like that?
I was a co-sponsor of that.
Oh, there you were.
So again, it's something where I want to have those discussions, and I want to, have an opportunity to kind of see where we can go and actually get some of this additional revenue. Because if people are living here full time, that's one thing. But when we're talking about secondary homes that are sitting vacant for a majority of the year, and that these are homes that could be rented out per se. Then there is a problem, especially when we have, going back to the housing market, the issues that we do in housing people, and this will help kind of allow us to, make sure that we have enough supply.
All right, so let's move on to your candidacy. Big issues. I looked at your website: education, healthcare. Let's start with healthcare. Your Medicare. Is it called Medicare for all?
Yes, yeah, I think that we need to have a universal healthcare system that actually takes care of all people here in our country.
Okay, so let me clarify this so I understand it. So there's two types of Medicare for all. One is like we have it now, where Medicare, the government takes care of the billing, but we still have a private system out there. Private hospitals, you go to whatever hospital you want to.
Yep.
So, but then there's sort of government-run healthcare.
Yes.
Which side are you on?
I'm more on the government-run side of things because
They would run hospitals.
That's not necessarily the case. I mean, I think that when we're talking about the federal government running hospitals, I don't think that that's necessarily the way that we should be pursuing things. However, I mean, when we're talking about the privatization of hospitals, that's very bad. I mean, we saw, a number of hospitals in the state be purchased by HCA, for instance. And that, I think, was a very bad decision. We've seen, quality of care go down. I mean, my mom used to be an occupational therapist at Frisbee Hospital down in Rochester, and she left that job. I mean, it became, a kind of a battle between paperwork and providing people the care that they need. And, that was just something where it was, more difficult than it was worth. And so, I mean, she was working, 2 jobs at that time, being also an occupational therapist in the Rochester school system. And so, I mean, I think that, my insight there is the fact that, we shouldn't have privatization in any sort of healthcare industry.
But you have, other countries, and my son, who's actually older than you, married a woman from Brazil, and it's really like the same way it works, same thing it works in England, where they have a public clinics and all that first level of care, but pretty much anybody who has any money then pays privately for the better care. I mean, how do you avoid that?
Well, that's where, when we have a multi-tiered system, it breaks down. And we see people, have worse outcomes, pay more, and also have, longer hospital stays in some ways because they're not necessarily being prioritized. And that's something where we need to try and, make sure that we have a system that actually works for everyone. And that's a Medicare for All system that is run, by the government and is not necessarily a Medicare for All type system, which is the other style of Medicare for All, which I don't think is the proper way forward. I mean, when we're talking about how these tiered systems work, it is something where Australia, they went from a single tiered system to a multi-tiered system, and what they saw was an increase in costs, a decrease in life expectancy, and also a decrease in quality of care. And that's something where that is all because of us, not us, but them choosing to go for a system that prioritizes profit over people. And that's what the United States has gone for far too long. And this is where people, I think, need to make sure that they're provided the adequate care.
What system in the world would you model after?
What system? And I think that, there can be discussions about that, but, I think that, the Scandinavian countries, for instance, have good models, and there are a number in the European Union that could be pursued. But, this is something where, at the end of the day, it needs to be a single-tiered system.
Okay. Education. And your website, basically, to summarize it, you just want more access to more educational institutions for our students.
Yes, I mean, I think that we need to be prioritizing trade schools, especially. Universal free trade schools should be something that we are pushing across the country. I mean, when we're talking about AI and the impact that AI is having on the job market right now, I mean, when I was first going into college, I remember everybody was saying, oh, go into computer science, there will be plenty of jobs. And now it's an oversaturated job market that's being dominated by AI, and people are losing their jobs left and right. And this is where, when we think about, future-proofing our workforce.
Are you seeing people losing their job with AI yet?
I've talked to some people, not necessarily here in New Hampshire, but
your age?
my age, that have not necessarily been able to find employment after losing a job in the computer science sector. I mean, if we look at the S&P 500, for instance, and that usually follows, the labor market pretty closely. It's something where if you look at the total employment numbers versus the S&P, since November of last year, we've actually seen the S&P continue to go up, but job numbers are falling down. And so it's kind of broken the traditional graph that we see of them kind of modeling fairly close to one another. And I think that kind of shows you exactly the type of impact that AI is having, because people are losing their jobs, but they're not necessarily seeing that type of impact on the stock market. And so the fact that we have to pursue future-proof jobs, we have to think about what those jobs are. And the fact is that AI is not going to replace a pipe. They're not going to cut a beam. They're not going to be able to install electrical in your house. I mean, we need plumbers, electricians, carpenters, all the trades. And that's what we need to be pushing, because those jobs are going to be future-proof. I mean, AI is not going to replace a pipe. It's not. It's not going to happen. And that's where we need to be telling people, this is an opportunity for you. This is where you can go and actually find consistent work. Because, I mean, I've also talked to a lot of people who need, plumbing up here. So they need somebody to come fix their pipes. And they can't find anybody in New Hampshire. They have to call somebody from Massachusetts to come up.
So you think that we should have trade schools, and what about higher education?
Yeah, we need
secondary, free?
Yeah,
you're talking about free.
We need to have tuition-free public universities. I mean, they pay for themselves. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we can look at any country in the world that's pursued these types of models, and the fact is that economically, we see massive returns when we invest in higher education, when we invest in trade schools.
So who would invest? Who would pay for to run UNH if we didn't have tuition?
The government. I mean,
the state government.
Yeah, keep in mind, I mean, up until the 70s, we had tuition-free public universities here in the United States. I mean, it's something where we have had this model before. I mean, it is something where, at the end of the day, by placing tuition on this information and this access, we are actively limiting the type of people that can pursue higher education in the first place. We might have the next Albert Einstein, but they might not necessarily have the money to go to university. And I think that that's a huge loss. And it's something where we should try and empower people to fulfill their whole potential.
Just going back to the state, since we're talking about free access, open enrollment for high school kids we do have open enrollment in the state, but if I want to send my kid to another school system, the school has to accept it. I mean, has to decide. They have the power to decide whether to accept that kid, and also they don't. My school system doesn't have to pay for it. So there's legislation now, right? I think it's milling around in the House where it would allow every kid to go to any other school district, and then the school district they come from would pay that other sending school. So what do you think about that?
I think that would be fine if we had the government fully paying for all of our schools. I mean, I think...
When you say the government, you're talking about the state here.
I'm talking about the state, because keep in mind, we haven't fulfilled our constitutional obligation in 30 years. I mean, since the Claremont decision, we haven't fulfilled the obligation that the state is supposed to fill 50% of all school funding, and we haven't done that. That is a huge failure, and it's something where the town tax and the local property taxpayers are the ones picking up that bill. That's not the way that things should be, and that's where we're seeing huge discrepancies in educational outcome. I mean, you have Newcastle paying around $45,000 per student, and then other school districts paying around $5,000 per student. That's a huge discrepancy, and it's a situation where we're going to see, certain school districts be fully drained pretty much, sending their kids elsewhere, and we're going to have to still figure out how we can make sure that we can educate the students that are left behind. And this is where an open enrollment program is trying to instead change the equity around where kids are going to school, when in reality we should be talking about the funding and how that actually changes the equity and the ability for a child to get adequate education.
Now, even if there are payoffs to all this, I think people are listening to this saying, wait a minute, we get free education, free health care, and you can make the argument that, in the long run it's going to pay off. We have a more educated population, healthier people. It costs money.
It does.
So that gets back to realistically.
Yes.
How? Realistically.
Well,
and this gets back to the tax situation.
It does. It does. Well, we can start with healthcare. I mean, healthcare, the U.S. right now, we spend $4.9 trillion a year on healthcare. If we were to pursue a universal healthcare system like Medicare for all, we would spend around $3.5 trillion. And there have been multiple studies about this, looking at a 10-year span, an average. And it's something where we're talking about around $1.4 trillion worth of savings. We're talking $1 trillion minimum being saved. That is by far worth it. We're already paying for healthcare that is more expensive and worse than anywhere else in the world. So I think that, by pursuing a system that actually prioritizes putting that money towards your healthcare rather than a C-suite executive's bonus is a far better investment. Because, one of the things that we don't really talk about is the bureaucracy of the private sector. And the fact is that healthcare, it's a completely privatized bureaucratic system. And I think that we need to be putting the money towards the people rather than the bureaucracy in that case. When we're talking about education, this is another one that does also cost a lot of money. But, going back to, who we need to tax the billionaires, we need to tax large corporations. And when I'm talking about large corporations, we also need to realize that we're giving away huge tax subsidies and, breaks to these huge corporations and then turning around and then giving them, additional leverage in the sense that they're providing their employees with notifications of when they can go get information as to how they can receive federal benefits. So when you have a company like Walmart who's turning around and telling their employees how to do this, not only are they getting the tax breaks, not only are they getting the subsidies, but they're also getting their employees' health care coverage paid for by the government because they refuse to pay for it. And I think that's wrong. I think that we need to be pushing for a healthcare system that is paid for by everyone. And, keep in mind too, this will also benefit small businesses because it will take a huge line item out of their budget, but it'll also make sure that, it's more affordable for the average American. And, I know that in terms of education, this is the other aspect of the funding pie, but, when we're looking at the educational opportunities that are here in this country, we have some of the best universities anywhere in the world. People are competing to come here. Yes, in terms of some of the private institutions, they're going to probably continue with their tuition system because that's not necessarily going to be affected. What is going to be affected is the public university systems, places like the University of New Hampshire, which has the highest in-state tuition anywhere in the country. And we need to think about how, lowering the tuition on this, even, marginally, even if we don't get all the way down to zero, that will have huge benefits. And so in terms of paying for the university system, yes, we do need to tax these large corporations, but we also need to think about taking money from the Pentagon. Because, the Pentagon has failed its last 6 budget or audits. And that's not acceptable. 6 audits in a row and they can't fulfill that information. If we took half of the Pentagon's budget and put it towards other items like healthcare, like education, we would not see any increases in our taxes at all.
Right. If you're going up against, that's a whole other subject. If you're suggesting cutting the military budget, it's bloated, it's wasteful and all that, but
Yep.
Nobody wants to cut the military budget. Except maybe you.
Well,
We
need
have,
to.
we have wars, and it needs
Well, yeah.
modernization and all that. That's a tough one.
Well, yeah, exactly. But this is the thing. We're spending money on all of these additional wars that we don't really need to. We got involved in Iraq because of oil. People will say WMDs, but it was oil. And we're seeing the same thing with Venezuela potentially and, bombing Iran. What is that going to do if we're taking out the largest oil reserves anywhere in the world? Iran has some pretty large oil reserves. At the end of the day, it's about controlling the price of oil. And I think that we need to be thinking beyond what just the price of oil is, and we need to be thinking about the lives of American servicemen and women because they're the ones who are going to be fighting this battle, and it's not necessarily appropriate, in my opinion, to send them overseas to die for corporate greed.
All right, fair enough. Politics. So you're in the primary. We have a primary
Yes.
before you get to the general. Stephanie Shaheen is sort of the name brand in this race, and Maura Sullivan. What do the polls show? What are you reading in the polls?
Yeah, so we had a poll from the University of New Hampshire that shows that our campaign is currently sitting in second place. We're one of 2 candidates.
Second place after Shaheen.
Yeah, after Shaheen. And we're sitting, we're one of 2 campaigns that are in the double digits. And I think that's really important because people are looking for some different type of energy. I mean, I was the first union-endorsed candidate in this race. I have the support of nearly 40 state reps and other local elected officials. And people are excited about the fact that I'm 25, but despite that, I still have more experience as an elected official than any of the other candidates in this race. And that's very valuable information.
What about, I mean, Shaheen is sort of an obvious, it's obvious why she's leading because of her name, for sure.
Yes.
And also has a interesting background and experienced. But Maura Sullivan, she ran before, so how do you account for her? So I would say she has more name recognition than you.
Yeah.
So how do you account for her, for you being ahead of her?
I mean, keep in mind, I'm sitting, despite being second in the polls, I'm third in name recognition. The thing is that the people who know me love me, and that's the thing. I mean, when we're looking at things like people who didn't vote in 2024. I mean, we had a poll from St. Anselm's that shows that we're polling at 40% with people who didn't vote in 2024, with the other 60% being undecided. They're either on our team or bust. And it's the same thing with looking at the different demographics that we can break down into. I mean, we are building the strongest coalition of any of the candidates in the first congressional race. I mean, 46% of independents and Republicans say that they would prefer our campaign, versus the next Democratic candidate being, I believe, 12%. So it's a very large discrepancy there, and we're able to reach all different types of political backgrounds, and it's not necessarily something where we are one issue or anything that's guiding us. It is the fact that we're talking to as many people of as many different political beliefs as possible, and we're reaching out to voters of all different types.
And so when you get on the debate stage, whenever that happens with the other three candidates, what are you going to say that's going to separate you from the rest, in a nutshell?
Yeah. Well,
and that'll be our last question.
Yeah. What will separate me in a nutshell? Well, I'm a different type of Democrat. I'm not somebody who's going to sit there and say, I'm not Trump, or, we need to, do this or that, or write down party line, because I'm not a party hack. The fact of the matter is, I'm somebody who believes deeply that this country is very broken, and that we need to have moral courage to stand up and fix it. It doesn't matter if I'm working with Republicans, Democrats, independents. We need to make sure that we have an opportunity to heal this country, and that means having conversations with everyone. It also means leading with clarity and morality. And this is something where I'll throw a little bit of shade out there. We need to have very defined issues, and that means issues pages on their websites. And this is something where we have seen so often people refusing to actually be clear as to what their stances are, and instead they will placate to the voters. But that's where, I'm very different. I'm talking about things like universal health care. I'm talking about universal education. I'm talking about banning private equity firms and large corporations from the single-family housing market. And I'm talking about a living wage, things that actually affect everyday people. And that's what we need our elected officials to be doing right now, and that's what I promise to be doing if I get elected in Washington.
Very good. Heath, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, and I'm sure we will cross paths again as the season progresses.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you for having me today, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.